So, today's sermon is about Abigail, David's wife. Oh, I actually called it David's wise wife. And if I were to put a qualifier into what kind of wife she was of David, it implies that David had other wives, right? Do anybody want to shout out, how many wives did King David have? Shout out. Some people say hundreds. Some people say if you count his concubines, it could have been maybe 1,000. So nobody really knows for sure. The Bible doesn't indicate that. The only thing the Bible indicates for sure is the Bible names 8 specific names of wives that David had. The first one we studied her, Michal, right? The daughter of King Saul, right? And wife number two is Ahinoam, through which David had his first son, Amnon. Abigail is David's wife number 3. And then, I'm not going to go through all the names, but wife number 8 is the famous Bathsheba, right? Now, what's also interesting is, according to the Talmud is a Jewish book of law and regulations. They actually cite Abigail as one of the 4 most beautiful women in the whole world. According to Jewish tradition, it was Abigail, it was Esther, right? Queen Esther. It was also Sarah, Abraham's wife. Some of you may recall that Sarah was so beautiful. When Abraham was traveling through Egypt, he was so afraid that the Pharaoh may seize Sarah to be his wife, so he lied about Sarah to say, she is not my wife, she is my sister. And the 4th most beautiful woman in the whole world, according to Jewish tradition, is, I thought it might be Bathsheba, but it wasn't. It was Rahab, the prostitute who hid the 2 spies in Jericho. So a little bit of a trivia to start off today's study on Abigail from 1 Samuel chapter 25. So I'm going to give you an overview, right? Today we're going to learn about these 3 main characters in 1 Samuel chapter 25. There's Nabal, the husband of Abigail. There's David, and there's Abigail. And if you look at the Jewish names of theirs, it gives some clue. So Nabal in Jewish means the fool. David in Jewish, in Hebrew, means the beloved. And Abigail in Hebrew means the source of joy. So we are going to be learning about these 3 characters, and like I've been doing in my sermon series on this relationship of David, I have to share with you, read to you the story first so you understand the plot. And after you understand the plot and how each of the 3 main characters acted, then I would try to pull together the biblical insights that this passage gives on each one of these characters so that we can apply some of these insights into our own lives. That's the best. Now, you might, as we go through this passage, you may say, oh, man, he's acting like my husband, or she's acting like my girlfriend. But we'll all try our best to understand the story so that we can take the lessons for ourselves. Okay. Now, Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him, and they buried him at his home in Ramah. Then David moved down into the desert of Paran. A certain man in Mayon, who had property there at Carmel, was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing in Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman, but her husband was surly and mean in his dealings. He was a Calebite. Now, this name Calebite is exactly the ancestor, Joshua and Caleb. Do you remember that Moses sent out 12 spies into the promised land to scout it before they were about to overtake it. And you may remember that 10 of the 12 spies says, there's no way we can beat them. All the men in Jericho and the promise, they're all like this tall. They're like giants. There's no way we can overtake them. So they actually, these 10 spies exhorted Moses and the rest of the Israelites, let's go back, really. Go back to Egypt and be slaves? Ridiculous. Only Joshua and Caleb had enough trust in the Lord to say, no, we should go. And some of you may know, as punishment for their lack of faith, that first generation of Israelites who God brought them out of Egypt, they all wandered in the desert for 40 years until they all died, until the next generation were able to go in. And out of that first generation of some 600,000 men, probably a couple of million Israelites that came out of Egypt, only Joshua and Caleb entered the promised land, because you know Moses wasn't allowed to go in as well. So the point I'm trying to make is Caleb was highly revered, and he was from the house of Judah. So on your outline, right, because it's important for you to understand the plot line and the stories and the details, on your outline, the first C is Calebite. Nabal was a Calebite from Judah, and he was very wealthy. He was a property owner. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep. And the Bible also says that he was surly and mean. And perhaps because he was placed in such a nice position of wealth and power, perhaps that's the reason why he was arrogant. Then the Bible, which we just read, says Abigail, on the other hand, was intelligent and beautiful, and she was from a high socioeconomic status because she was married to this Nabal. While David was in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. So he sent 10 young men and said to them, "Go up to Nabal at Carmel and greet him in my name. Say to him, 'Long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours.'" Now I hear that it is sheep shearing time. When your shepherds were with us, we did not mistreat them. And the whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs was missing. Ask your own servants, and they will tell you. Therefore, be favorable towards my men, since we come at a festive time. Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them. It's very important. In Deuteronomy, God instructed these Israelites that when it comes time for harvest, especially when it comes time to celebrate your harvest with a feast, you are to be generous to foreigners, to your slaves, to your servants, to the widows and orphans, so that they can come into your fields and pick up the leftover food. So when David makes this request, it is very scriptural, or it's in line with what the Israelites were taught. Now let's continue on. When David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name, and then they waited. So I have to remind you that at this point in the story, David is a fugitive. He is running away from King Saul because King Saul doesn't want David to become king because he's so jealous of him. But not only that, if David becomes king, then his own son Jonathan will not be king, right? Remember that story? So it's important for you to know that today's story, David is a fugitive, although he was anointed as a future king of Israel by Samuel. But you see, Samuel never told him. God never told him when he will be officially king. He was just anointed as king. So what that means is King Saul probably posted a photograph of David, such as this one, in every single post office in Israel to say, public enemy number 1, wanted. If anybody sees him, report him to me so we can capture him. That was a condition that David was under at this time in the story. And I also want to point out to you that David is from the tribe of Judah. So actually, David and Nabal both come from this prestigious, esteemed tribe of Judah. Let's continue on. Nabal answered David's servant. Now remember the request, right? Who is this David? Who is the son of Jesse? This is what you call a rhetorical question. Of course he knows who David is. David conquered the giant Goliath. Everybody in Israel knows about that. As a matter of fact, he already knows that David is a son of Jesse. Many servants are breaking away from the masters these days. Isn't that an interesting comment for him to make? At first, I thought that Nabal was saying, hey, these days it's so hard to get good help, servants are leaving the masters, so that's sort of a setup to say that I don't want to spare any of my food for you. But in reading scholarly commentaries, this comment that he made was Nabal's insinuation that David's only a servant of Saul. So he was insulting David through this comment. And then Nabal says to David's emissaries, why should I take my bread and water and the meat I have slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men coming from who knows here? As if they may have some virus, right? I don't even know who they are. But like I said before, they should have known that it was a custom that during festival time, you're supposed to be generous and give some of your leftovers to foreigner strangers. So Nabal knows what he's doing wrong, and this was his excuse. David's men turned around and went back. When they arrived, they reported every word. David said to them, each of you, strap on your sword. So they did, and David strapped his own on as well. About 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. So basically David said, all right, man, that's it. Come with me, man. Let's rumble. And it kind of reminded me to those of you oldies, the West Side Story. There was a big rumble between the Jets and the Sharks. Or some of you more younger one, you might remember in the story of Greece, Danny Zuko, a.k.a. John Travolta, they were part of the Thunderbirds. And they were always fighting against the gang called the Scorpions, right? So here we see now two angry men about to get into some unnecessary violence so that each can protect their pride, right? This is what young men like to get into. But thank God for a wise, discerning woman by the name of Abigail. One of the servants told Abigail, Nabal's wife, David sent messengers from the wilderness to give our master his greetings, but he hurled insults at them. Yet these men were very good to us. They did not mistreat us, and the whole time we were out in the fields near them, nothing was missing. Night and day they were a wall around us. The whole time we were herding our sheep near them. How nice, right? Many of you, if you own a business or your parents own a business, that's life. Not only in the States, in Singapore and Taiwan. You have a business, and if there's gangsters, they all have their turfs, and they'll come to the owner to say, I need some money for protecting you, right? So, David was nice. David in those days saw these innocent farmers, shepherds of Nabal, and he willingly, on his own, protected them because he had 600 loyal band of soldiers with him. And so his request is very reasonable, right? He didn't say, like the gangsters do, hey, Nabal, I protected all your men and sheep. I demand this kind of ransom money. He didn't. He was so nice. He said, just give me whatever you could. Just give me whatever food leftovers you have. Okay. So back to the story. Now it's a servant of Abigail who actually complained that their master is so wicked, doesn't listen to us, says, Abigail, please think it over and see what you could do, because disaster is hanging over our master Nabal and his whole household. This is the employee saying, he is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him. So isn't it interesting how a servant actually went to Abigail and asking for help? So what does Abigail do? Abigail acted quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread. Now remember, David has 600 men. So one big loaf, 600 divided by 200, could be eaten by 3 soldiers. Not only that, she also brought 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed figs. That's 300 delicious, yummy desserts. Divided by 600, that means each soldier can split a whole cake to themselves, right? And loaded them on donkeys. Then she told her servants, it's not as if she called DoorDash or Uber to say, okay, bring this up. Then she told her servants, go on ahead, I will follow you. Personal responsibility for this. But she did not tell her husband Nabal. As she came riding her donkey into a mountain ravine, there were David and his men descending toward her, and she met them. David had just said to his men, it's been useless. Wives, have you ever heard your husband say to you after you propose something, it's useless, it won't work, right? Or it can be the reverse. Wives, have you ever said to your boyfriend, when your boyfriend suggested something for the sake of a relationship, and then you say, it's no use, it's useless, right? All my watching over this fellow's property in the wilderness, so that nothing of his was missing, he has paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him. David had soldiers with weapons. Nabal didn't. So clearly, David was in a position to really wipe them out. When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. That's showing her humility, right? She fell at his feet and said, pardon your servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal. He is just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with it. You got to really like Abigail, right? I mean, she tells it like it is. This is her own husband that, yes, she is protecting him. That's why she's risking her life to do this. But yet, she calls a spade a spade. Don't listen to my husband. He is a fool. And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my Lord sent. And now, my Lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives, and as you live, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands. I'm going to pause now because I want all of us to see the diplomacy of Abigail. I want all of you to see the wise tactfulness of Abigail, which reminds me of Esther. Do you guys remember the story of Esther? That before she got King Xerxes to listen to her, she first acknowledged, King Xerxes, I know that at your command you can have me killed because nobody can request an audience with you unless called, right? And then she kind of wined and dined Xerxes' food, right? So this is the extreme intelligence of Abigail. And if you want it in more crass terms, women, by now you know that if you want your husband and your boyfriend to do something for you, you got to massage their ego. I mean, that's there's no two ways about it. And so the wisdom of Abigail, besides massaging her man's ego, also ties what she wants David to do with the more noble part in a man's character. You know, all men, we love respect. We probably want more respect than love. And when you appeal to our nobility to do the right thing that will please God, that really works. And that's what she said. She said, now, David, I know that Samuel anointed you as future king. And if you're going to be the future king, I don't think you want to have bloodshed on your hands. And I don't think God will want to see you being very vengeful with your hands. That's exactly what Abigail is doing. May your enemies and all who are intent on harming my Lord be like Nabal. And let this gift, lots of great food and wine, which your servant has brought to my Lord, be given to the men who follow you. All right? So this is what Abigail did. You guys know what happened? Remember, David is really, really mad. I mean, he's already assembled 600 men, right? And you know how men's testosterone can be, right? When you're mad, it's very hard to stop angry man. So do you think it works? This is what happened. Abigail continued to say, please forgive your servant's presumption. Now, women, how many of you wives, if there's a conflict between you and your husband and you want to start the conversation, talk it out, how many of you ever start off by saying, honey, please forgive me. I could be completely wrong about this, right? My whole assumptions could be wrong, right? But can you hear me out? Do we ever start like that? Or do we say, honey, let me tell you what you did wrong to me. Or I really was so upset that you did this for me, right? So there's just so much wise ways to communicate that you can learn from Abigail's approach. So Abigail says, please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my Lord, because you fight the Lord's battles and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. So this is proof that she knew Samuel's prophetic anointment on David as a future king of Israel. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies, he, God, will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. Do you know why I highlighted that phrase in yellow? Abigail is so smart in her persuasive arguments to convince David. She even uses a metaphor, the slingshot, that David is so familiar with, right? She is just so smart. When the Lord has fulfilled for my Lord, this is David, every good thing he promised concerning him and has anointed him ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or of having avenged himself. And when the Lord your God has brought my Lord success, remember your servant. Amazing wisdom of Abigail. She can immediately, I'm sure after prayer, see the consequences on each person's action. She saw the consequence of what her foolish husband Nabal did. She sees the consequence to David if he were to carry out that revenge scheme, right? So another key thing she does is she sees ahead to the consequence of a potential action, and she appeals to the nobility in David, the more powerful one, to do the right thing. David said to Abigail, praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from the bloodshed this day and from avenging myself with my own hands. You know, brothers and sisters, no matter what you think about David, right? He's got so many wives. He marries so many wives for the wrong reasons, right? He seems to use his wives to manipulate them for his own purposes, right? But you got to tell this to David. When he is made aware of his own sin or his own faults or his own blind spot, whether it needed a prophet Nathan to wake him up, or when Abigail, in such a diplomatic type of way, points out his blind spot, he listens and he repents. You got to give this to David. Otherwise, David says, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive by daybreak. Men, if you were in David's shoes, what would you have done? If I try to put myself in David's shoes, I would have definitely gladly accepted all this food from Abigail. I'm famished. Thank you so much, Abigail. Man, let's have a feast. Let's eat. But quickly, because we need to go march down to Carmel, and we need to punish Nabal. I would have done that. I would have first ate everything, be straightened up, and I would have gone to teach Nabal a lesson. I probably won't kill him, but I would humiliate him because of all my might, right? That's what I would have done. And and that's what David intended to do. But David, because he is a man after God's own heart and he is repentant, he had a more gracious response. Then David accepted from her hand what she brought to him and said, Abigail, go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request. When Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a banquet like that of a king. That's Nabal. He was in high spirits and very drunk. So she told him nothing at all until daybreak. Again, the wisdom of Abigail to know when's the right time to speak and when's the right time to just let it go and not say anything. Then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all these things, and his heart failed him, and he became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. Now, we don't know if Nabal, when he found out of what Abigail did, his heart failed him, and he became a stone. Was he upset at Abigail for betraying him? But Abigail actually saved his own life. Or was he mad that he lost, 100 loaves of bread and some cakes and 5 sheep? I don't think so. I think what's more important is the fact that 10 days later, the Bible says it's God who punished Nabal, and he died. He had a heart attack and died. And so we are all reminded of the verse from Romans when Jesus or God says, vengeance is mine. So we learn from David in this case, do not seek revenge against any of your enemies, no matter how more powerful you are, because you are the Lord's anointed. You're representing the name and testimony of Jesus Christ. Give it up to God. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, praise be to the Lord who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He kept his servant from doing wrong and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head. So David really acknowledged that, thank God, I did the right thing. I listened to Abigail. I knew that vengeance is the Lord's, and the Lord followed through on it. Then David sent word to Abigail asking her to become his wife. But this David is really opportunistic, isn't he? You know, he was nice. As long as Abigail was married and he's looking at the 4th most beautiful woman in the whole world, he stood his ground. And once he found out that Abigail is now a widow, he asked Abigail for her hand. His servants went to Carmel and said to Abigail, David has sent us to you to take you to become his wife. She bowed down with her face to the ground and said, I'm your servant and am ready to serve you and wash the feet of my Lord's servants. Abigail quickly got on a donkey and, attended by her 5 female servants, went with David's messengers and became his wife. A very happy ending, right? Remind you of what happened to Queen Esther, right? Or even what happened to her uncle Mordecai, right? Unbelievable. So, brothers and sisters, now I want to ask you, which one of these characters are you? Do you find a little bit of Nabal in you? Kind of, when everything's going well for you, you're not scared of anybody. You're the boss. Are you like David, a good man, a caring man, but when his good intention is treated back with insults and contempt, do you get mad and want to seek out revenge? Or are you like Abigail? Abigail goes, hey, it's none of my problem. I didn't know what happened. Let David duke it out with Nabal, and I'm going to stay out of this. But by the wisdom of God, she intervened and acted quickly. So I want to put this all in for you. There's a lot in here. So you know how on your outline, I had the three main characters, and I have A, B, C, and D. This is what each one means. The A information gives the position that each of the three main characters started off in the story. So if you were to apply it to your own life, you can all start out with the position you are in now, right? This is like the cards that was dealt to you by God, right? Okay, either some of you were born in a wealthy family, some of you may have been born in a poor family, many of you may have been born in United States, a free country, or some of you could have been born in Wuhan, China, and look what kind of predicament you would be, right? Some of you could have been born like Abigail with beauty and intelligence, or some of you could have been given athletic skills instead, not to say that the athletes are dumb, or you may have been granted musical skills, and I'm not implying that musical people are not good looking. You can have all of this. But my point is, we all start off in some kind of a position. And so in the outline, A summarized the position they're being. Then in B, I summarize for you the character traits that each of these characters exhibited in this story. And you gotta wonder if the way you respond to the position that God is giving you will influence your character. Nabal has so much going for him. He got a good pedigree, part of the tribe of Judah and the Calebite. He got a lot of money, a lot of servants. Probably that made him arrogant. But by the same token, Abigail, who also had access to all this wealth and this high socioeconomic standing, and she was beautiful, and she was intelligent, she wasn't arrogant at all. She actually probably had an ugly husband, right? So it just shows you that everybody doesn't start out with every good thing. And you know, the David, right? David's position in the story is so interesting because he was in I call it a tenuous position, an interim position. And many of us can relate to him. He was told he is going to be the next king of Israel, but he wasn't told when. And God, what are you doing to me? I'm like running for my life, right? So this is like, how many of you guys have heard of this verse? Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you. Famous verse, right? So you can say, hey, as a Christian, and I'm being taught that I should claim the promise of God, right? God, why do I not have a good job like my other friends, right? Oh God, I've been a good Christian, faithful Christian, and you still haven't brought the lady of my dreams or a nice Christian man to be my husband, right? Or God, why am I still struggling with depression, right? Oh God, why haven't you taken this illness away from me, right? Many of us are in a position like David. We haven't received the full blessings of God yet. And the question is, how do you react? Which leads us to, in C, I summarize for you the course of action each of the three characters took. And in D, I show you the outcome of what God did, which was based on the course of action. So, brothers and sisters, here's the way I'm going to summarize everything for you. And it's kind of interesting because these three biblical insights I'm going to summarize for you from today's message actually were insights from the last three sermons that was preached at reGeneration. The first insight I want to give to you is today's passage reveals the immaturity in all of us human beings. The immaturity that says, I want what I want when I want it. That was exhibited by Nabal. That was exhibited by David. And that's the subject of Pastor Joseph's sermon 2 Sundays ago about spiritual immaturity. What Jesus Christ does for us, which is give all of us born-again, regenerated Christian godly wisdom. That was the subject of Pastor Sam's message about godly wisdom or worldly wisdom. And then the choice, the course of action that each one of you today have before you by listening to this message is actually what I preached about last Sunday. Do you remember? Jonathan had a choice. Do I insist on my entitlement and not be friends with David, or even give tip information so that David can be killed so that I can be the next king of Israel? Or because God has revealed to me that he wants David to be the next king of Israel, I willingly submit to David, right? So the choice before you, if I were to summarize everything, is this. All of us face trials, tough situations, predicaments in our life. And many of us may be saying to God, God, you haven't given me what you promised yet. So the choice before you is, do you react based on your feelings and your emotions like Nabal did or David was about to? Or you have a choice. You could respond like Abigail, with discernment, with faith, and with decisiveness. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the story of Abigail, of how a wise woman prevented a terrible, unnecessary violence between two angry men. And so, Lord, there's lessons to be learned in each one of us. If we're really honest with ourselves, sometimes we may be like arrogant. We may become self-reliant based on all the good things that's happening to us and the position we're in. Sometimes we can be like David, who gets upset if our good, kind action is not taken for what we expect. But Lord, we pray today that we may all be like Abigail, to always respond with grace, with discernment, not say this is not my problem, but if lives are at stake, if God's reputation and the church community at stake, that can we be an intercessor, and may it be that you are asking us to intervene in this case on your behalf for your glory. I pray, Lord, that your Holy Spirit will impress upon each one of us today how we are to respond to these circumstances in our life. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.